Hey guys, Cade Wilcox here, host of the Primitive Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Today we're joined by Tom Sell of Combest Sell Associates. Tom's just a really great guy, really genuine, has over 20 years of experience in all levels of the national government, really advocates for some ag associations and really represents a lot of rural communities. And so really enjoyed having him on today and listening to his perspective of leadership and what that looks like in the context of his work. So again, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy today's episode.
I think an important aspect of leadership is just being stubborn at the right time, being beholden to a set of principles that drive you, studying and being knowledgeable, and really working to assess all the facts and all the factors that are weighing in on a particular topic, and then standing your ground and being stubborn, being inviting and willing to work with and talk through the issues with anyone, but ultimately that kind of willingness to stand your ground, I think, is one of the key aspects of leadership.
Tom, thanks for joining the Primitive Podcast. It's really cool to have you here. Thanks for your time. Excited to kind of get your insight and perspective on leadership.
All right. Pleased to do it with you, Cade.
Let's roll. So for those who don't know Tom Sell, tell us about you, about your background, about the work you do now, just a overview of what you do.
All right. Yeah, Tom Sell. I'm a, fifth generation West Texan. Love this region of the world. I went to Texas Tech University, studied ag economics, went out to Washington, D.C. Right after undergrad, participated in this messy environment, this crucible of ideas called the U.S. Congress, was a staff for the former Congressman Larry Combest from this area, who preceded Randy Naugabauer, who preceded Jody Arrington, of course. Combest was the third representative of that 19th district, George Mahon, Kent Hance, Larry Combest, and then we've had a great legacy.
That's
now
not very many.
Generation.
That's not very many people.
No, yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
But really, a powerful group when you look at the footprint of guys like Mahon, for sure, Hance, Combest. There's a lot to live up to there. So, Godspeed, Jody. So I worked for Congress for multiple years. Did work in the Agriculture Committee. Really grew to love this kind of esoteric and unique area of public policy. It's something that affects each of us, really 3 times a day in the food that we eat. One of the most fundamental, purposes of a government is to provide security for its people and to supply resources and to facilitate the best use of those resources. So agricultural policy has been part of our nation's fabric since our very beginning. And of course, we in the United States base that on kind of strong private property rights. We're going to invest in people to invest in the land and grow our culture from there. And so we've had a lot of different directions, and ag policy touches a lot of things, from international trade to environmental policy. So it's always a very active and interesting area that affects every American. So it's an area of policy that I was fortunate as a young man to be able to specialize in with Larry Combest. And then after moving back, going to law school, we were scared by just how much we loved the culture and our friends in Washington, D.C. Kyla and I always thought we wanted to raise our family here. So at a point we did kind of pick up roots, moved back, went to law school here, thought I'd hang a shingle and be a country lawyer, but then just kind of got pulled back into the policy debates in Washington, D.C. So we've had a firm, Combest Sell & Associates. We've been operating in the lobbying and public advocacy realm in Washington, D.C. since 2005.
Okay, wow. So not too far from 20 years now that you've been
coming
doing
up
that.
on it.
So without, I guess, getting too policy wonkish or into the details, how much, or not how much, because I'm sure it's changed a lot. But what are some things that you've noticed over the last 15 to 20 years? You kind of started in Congress, and now you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
What are some of the fundamental changes that you've seen over the course of time in the way that maybe Congress operates and in the way that things work in kind of that realm?
Yeah, it's a great question, Cade, and there's a lot of hand-wringing on this subject generally. This kind of feeling of are we losing something in our body politic? And I came in at the beginning of what was called the kind of the Contract with America era, when Newt Gingrich and the Republicans took control of the U.S. House of Representatives for the first time in 42 years. In
42 years?
Yeah, they've been in the wilderness for that amount of time. And a lot of people kind of blame a lot of the kind of the the bad movements, the negative movement of the U.S. Congress on that contract with America timeframe and Newt Gingrich, and going to the more compressed schedules. One of the narratives that you'll hear often is that, members of Congress don't spend any time around one another as families and as family units anymore, and so they lose some of that relational aspect that allows them to compromise and come across the aisle and create better policy. I'm sure there's some truth to that, but from my experience, Cade, Washington still runs on good people trying to pursue good ideas in winsome ways. You know this from your work. You're all about communications, and the field of play changes constantly, but there are always those who find a way to make it work, who find a way in the current environment to get their ideas across and push the envelope in positive ways. And that's still the case in Washington, D.C. It's certainly changed, but I'm a big defender and proponent of this very messy system that we have in the U.S. Congress. It's not designed to be slick or efficient by any means. It's designed to allow for this clash of ideas. There are certainly some things I'd do different. I'd love to see the committees restored with more power or given more power to really kind of hash through the details. But the fact is, a lot of people don't like that hashing through. They just want kind of a clean path from point A to point B. So it always has been a mess. It continues to be a mess. But we're still blessed to live in the greatest nation in the history of the world.
I agree with that. I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll get to leadership stuff.
Yeah.
Now I'm just fascinated by this stuff, and maybe some of our listeners, even those who are not inclined to engage in politics, find it interesting. But why does it feel so much different? Because like when I listen to you talk about it, and others that I know, like our mutual friend Barry Brown, it sounds like it's kind of been consistent, as long as y'all have been engaged with it. But why does it feel so much worse? Is it because of the rhetoric? Is it because of maybe the news media? Like why does it feel so much different now than, it did even 10 to 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, they always say the best friend of the good old days is a incomplete memory. It's never as good in the moment as it is in the rearview mirror. We've had messy politics ever since I can remember, but I will say this: we do tend to live in a constant hype machine these days, where you have a vast number of media outlets that are competing for our eyes and ears and likes and impressions, and so they tend to hype up every little story, and that's just not the way the real world works, right? It doesn't work that way in our friendships and our relationships, and that's also true of Congress. Just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean they're evil. And so we have in the media, in the public media, we tend to just over sensationalize everything. And I think that goes a lot to the reason why it feels so bad right now.
I'm always really encouraged when I talk to you because I'm like, I probably lean into that hype too much. And so it makes it feel chaotic. It makes it feel lost. It makes it feel impossible to recover. And so when I hear guys like you, who I respect, talk about how there's really been a level of this for a long time, it kind of gives me a bit of comfort thinking, okay, well, we'll see through this really unique season that it feels like we're in.
Cade, that's why you're kind of cool and fun to be around and always exciting. That's why I'm kind of a fuddy-duddy, right? I kind of minimize everything and yeah, we've been through this before, so
I should be more like you.
No.
My heart rate would probably go down substantially.
You keep things exciting.
Let's talk about leadership. So, like you have a unique role of advocacy and partnering with people to make things happen.
Yep.
So, when you think about leadership in your own context and your role in your organization and working, with the stakeholders that you work with, like what is your role as a leader? Like what is it that you're bringing to the table as a leader?
Yeah. So. Professionally, we represent a lot of grassroots organizations that are one, trying to be educated on the issues so they can pick the right battles, and a lot of what we do is try and provide wisdom and counsel into the issues that are important to them, and just help them pick the right battles. I think an important aspect of leadership is just being stubborn at the right time. Being beholden to a set of principles that drive you. So, and you have that, Cade. I have that. studying and being knowledgeable, and really working to assess all the facts and all the factors that are weighing in on a particular topic, and then standing your ground and being stubborn, being inviting and willing to work with and talk through the issues with anyone. But ultimately, that kind of willingness to stand your ground, I think, is one of the key aspects of leadership, and one of the things that's made our firm, I think, we're attractive, and we've been very successful through the years. Just because I think people see those qualities in us. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for leadership on the subjects. They're looking for someone who can help harness the power of a grassroots organization and that collective thought. I love the work, and we've been fortunate at it.
That's really good. What do you do? Like, how do you manage conflict? Like when you talk about standing your ground, choosing when to be stubborn, understanding your principles, helping people kind of navigate these decisions that they're making. Like, what's been your approach to handling conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question. I genuinely like it, and I don't get offended, and I think that helps people see that, and so they tend to follow our lead in dealing with that way. So I think the answer is we lean right into it. So if it's obvious that, let's say we're working for an association with a board that has division within it about the best direction to take, we just really try and lean in and get those issues on the table and debated and teed up in a constructive way, so that both sides can fully articulate their concerns or wishes or desires, and the other side can hear that. And genuinely, when you have that kind of very sincere and honest dialogue, it's respectable from both sides. We just try and take the temperature down, but provide the forum to allow it to be discussed. We do that in our little associations, and then that filters all the way up into a place like the U.S. Congress, where theoretically they're supposed to be doing the same thing. It is a little skewed because they tend to play to the cameras more. So it is. I think you need a safe space to do that, where it's there's not a feeling that the conflict is just that the opposite side is going to run off and kind of line up their battle lines against it. It's the idea that you are actually going to try and hash these things out in this safe space and environment.
When you lean into conflict, do you find that it tends, you just mentioned like lower the temperature. So is that probably the thing you see the most, that it kind of softens the edge of both sides and creates a conversation instead of everyone being in their silos? Heart rates are going up, temperature is starting to boil, edges are getting really sharp. I mean, is that kind of what you've seen? That's
exactly what I see. And it is a process that I just absolutely love. There's nothing more gratifying in my work than when we have some potential conflict and can kind of nip that in the bud, or just get the two sides to see one another's point of view. Because a lot of times when you see another point of view, it helps moderate your views in a way that would be more, a better place to end up. So it breeds that middle ground, which is important.
That's good. In your opinion, why do people on an individual level and group levels and organizations, why do you think they tend to do the opposite of leaning in? Like we're kind of naturally prone to, avoid conflict, avoid disagreement, kind of be in our echo chambers. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think we tend to avoid conflict?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we do. It's natural to want to be with people that are just like you, or will reaffirm your ideas and thoughts. But and while that's natural, I don't think it's necessarily the healthiest. We even deal with this in at my church, Kate. I mean, we want to be a church that resembles the body of Christ and all of its diversity and mix, and we want to, rather than holding people off into, okay, this is going to be the old person Sunday school class, and this will be the young, progressive, skinny jean wearing type people like yourself. No, I'm just
kidding. Come on.
Yeah, we try and mix it all together to have that. We learn from one another's diversity and different perspectives. It's harder to do. It's not as natural, but it really does bear a lot of fruit. So I don't think I answered your question.
No, that's good. I think So one thing I hear you saying, or that's a kind of a takeaway for me, is like it's really hard to address conflict with someone you don't know, you don't have a relationship with, you don't feel like you have common ground.
Yeah.
And I if you really trust someone and you really know them, it's not easy to have conflict, but it is easier.
Yeah.
And when you're really separated and you're siloed and you don't know their family, or you don't know their interests, or you don't know their background, or you don't know their story, then you tend to be driven by fear of how someone's going to respond. And so you can see that maybe, in some of our culture and some of the things that get heightened around politics is we tend to fear the things we don't know. And so maybe that could lend itself to being afraid of conflict.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's a great point, Cade. And I think when you have people bound together with kind of a common mission or purpose, where you can at least trust enough of one another enough to know that you're generally trying to get to the same place or the same direction. That's easy to think about, like in a church context, or it's easy to think about in a grassroots association where we're collectivized, toward a mission. You'd like to see it work better in places like the U.S. Congress, where theoretically they take an oath of office, which, in essence, I'll butcher it if I try and state it, but it's about protecting the Constitution and the principles and the ideas of the United States of America. Now, there are vastly different ways on how you get there, and sometimes party politics have skewed this to where are they fighting for the party or are they fighting for the country?
Or sound bites.
But boy, if we could create more sound bites, absolutely. But if we could create more of a culture of trust, where look, we know we have different points of view, but we know we're both trying to honor and promote the legacy of this great nation, pass it on to those who come after us better than it was passed on to us. If we could be united in that purpose, it would melt away a lot of the disagreements and at least allow for a better civil discourse.
It's fascinating you say that, because you could one could think about that at a level of the national government, which is very large and complex and feels really distant. But even if you boiled that down to a really small business or a small organization,
absolutely,
like Primitive, the more aligned we are around a common goal, the more we're going to trust each other, the more we're going to be empathetic and understanding when maybe we get crossways. Yeah. When you're further removed away from a common goal, it creates an environment for unhealthy conflict, and so it's really, really good insight. When you think about your last 15 to 20 years, as a leader at different levels, in your organization, when you worked in the federal government, how have you tried to view and handle failure?
I try and avoid it at all. Gosh. None of us like failure, but I think a lot of that is just having a longer range view. So if the goal is to act honorably, work hard, maintain your ethics and credibility, it makes the little battles on a day-to-day basis just smaller. I don't have all my pride wrapped up in whether I win this particular thing or not. My pride, my self kind of identity and worth is tied up in something far greater. And so I don't know if that really gets to your question, but it's the way certainly I've always tried to do things. I just, honestly, I can't look back and think of a lot of failures. There's probably a lot of things I would have done differently, but I think just not making too much out of the small battles on a day-to-day basis and concentrating on the bigger principles.
I've never thought of it in that way. When you talk about having a long-term view, like when you have a short-term view, every failure feels like, a major failure because you're only looking, so far. But when you look at it at a long view, it can change the perspective in the way that you feel failure or the way you allow it to, shape how you make that next move. So I like that. I've never thought of it in that perspective. How do you approach your own personal growth? You're I assume, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, you're dealing with a congressman and congresswoman and people, at least publicly, from a public view, have the most amount of authority and power and influence, and they're in the public square. And so, you have those stakeholders. Then you have the groups you're advocating for, and you have people in rural communities, and then you have your own staff, you have your family. So, like, how do you take all of that and approach your own personal growth and staying inspired in your own leadership?
Yeah. Man, that's a good question. I probably don't have the best methods on this, but I genuinely, I love education. I love the idea of personal growth. I love the idea of learning from other people by personal interaction. Seeing and being a part of their life and their journey and their walk in ways that we kind of rub and learn from one another. We do, certainly in our firm and with my employees, we place a lot of emphasis upon, reading, researching, thinking deeply, having a well-rounded spiritual life and personal life, and setting aside time to, for that kind of personal growth, pursuing hobbies and pastimes that are actually going to deepen your perspective and provide balance in the life. So I think all those aspects are really important. We certainly approach everything as we're lifetime learners. We also try and promote just a very humble way of looking at things. We're always here to learn. We can always do better and need to do better. And so I think all those things, it's probably not a very clear answer.
No, it's good. When you think, some things you just said is really interesting to me, like reading and thinking deeply. Like, how do you create that space? Because everything is moving at breakneck speed. Our work is moving fast, society is moving fast, culture is moving fast, our kids are growing up way too fast, marriages move fast. Like, everything seems to be really fast. So then when you say something like, reading and thinking deeply, like, how do you create the space for that?
It's hard. It feels particularly hard right now.
Right.
I'm worn out right now.
Yeah.
But I think for us, and really in my career, Kate, it's just been the early mornings. It's been the break of dawn and just setting aside. And it's just hard to do it at other times because I tend to be not very selfish with my time. I love to give it to others. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, there are no shortage of people wanting pieces of that time. So I've just had to develop a habit and a process for getting up early, having that kind of personal time, spiritual time, and then just the reading, the knowledge of the world, which is particularly important in the work I do in the world of politics. Being able to assess and think about what are the driving forces behind this particular piece of news or that. Reading the op-eds, really trying to cultivate our own opinions and careful, deliberate thought processes on the various issues that affect our clients and beyond. I mean, we have our world of ag policy, but think about it, those who work for us, and it's a great crew of people, we're all kind of built in this way of we want to make the world a better place. I think that's what attracted us to politics and to public policy. We don't think, our minds aren't set so much upon what mousetrap can I build to better the world today. That's a great business mindset. Our minds tend to go more on how do we set a fair set of rules that are going to allow the most people to achieve the greatest ends in our nation and culture. So we're very just policy oriented the way that we think, and so reading the news, getting a good sense of the world, and that kind of critical thought is important to that work.
Yeah, that's good. What are your gauges that help you understand that you're tired or that you're not your best self or whatever? For example, I find myself getting irritable and impatient, like more so than I already am impatient, or my energy starts to get really low, or I find myself complaining a lot. And those are triggers like I'm not eating well enough, I'm not sleeping well enough, I'm not exercising enough, I'm not creating space enough. What are those triggers for you when you think about your own personal health?
Yeah, I'm not good at self-assessment, so I rely a lot upon people that are around me, and most importantly, my wife, Kyla.
Yeah, they're good at that, aren't
Yeah.
they?
Oh, she's so good. She'll straighten me out, and even my work colleagues. Conflict is a natural part of our work. This kind of clash of ideas, and sometimes it gets out of hand, and it just causes you to kind of step back and think, wow, I may be too tired or not balanced in the way that I'm approaching things. So
That's good.
I think taking a lot of cues from other people around us.
Yeah, really leaning into other people. That's good.
Yeah.
If you could, this is always my favorite question personally, but like if you could go back 20, 25 years ago and speak to your younger self based on what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
I don't like that question as much as you do. No, I'm just kidding. This isn't going to be the answer you want, but one thing I love looking back at my 25 year ago self was the naivety really served me well. I didn't know better in a lot of instances than to just kind of launch into this particular issue. And I'm sure at that time when I was 22, 23, a lot of the seasoned war horses in Washington D.C. thought, man, what a foolish young kid who thinks he can do this or that. And I really do think that just kind of that bold naivety and kind of a foolish optimism in a sense that if I'm doing right, people are going to respect that, and they'll give me the time, and we can work through the issues, and it'll be great. And it was all very Pollyannish and good. And that's honestly one of the things that even I tell my young staff, just jump in there and give it a try. And if you do that with the right attitude, it's never going to go bad on you. So I do here 25 years later, there are certain battles I don't take because I probably know better at this point, and I wish I had some of that naivety from 25 years ago. It's the opposite of the question you asked. There are things, certainly. I don't know. When I bring on a young staff or something like that, I spend a lot of time just trying to really encourage them in thinking high ideas and pursuing those good goals. So
that's good. This is a bonus question. The time I've known you, which is fairly short, I've observed that, or at least I feel like you're a really good dad. I've met your sons a couple of times. It just feels like you're a really good dad. So like, what have you tried to do, as you parent to be good at that? I mean, I can tell your sons respect you. They're with you. So like, what have you done as a parent to like really focus on that?
Man, this is a deep topic, and I think if there's one kind of common thread to both Kyla's and my parenting, it's one that we love one another first, and we're about promoting one another with our kids. So one of the worst things I think can happen with kids is when the parents pit the kids against the other. So Kyla's and my being lockstep is key. I travel a lot. And I have throughout their childhood, but I think I've always wanted our kids to feel like they were my number one priority, even though I am working hard and putting a lot of hours in, and in a lot of cases neglecting certain things or not being able to be at events that I would have loved to have been at. But even though that's the case, my hope and my prayer through all those years has been that they would believe that if it really came down to it, if that I would drop everything to come and take care of what they need. And I think just that mentality in a kid is healthy. They need to know that their parents have their back, and then I like the old school manners and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we try and
No, they're good at it.
we train that stuff up.
Yeah, no, that's good. I struggle sometimes knowing like the balance I want my kids to know what you just said so bad.
Yeah.
'Cause sometimes I wonder if we don't try too hard to get them to know that they're like the most important thing to us. And so I wish there was a formula that said, here's the perfect balance.
Yeah.
Because we as parents don't want to overdo it, where they feel like they're the center of the world, because they're not.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things more important than all of us,
Indeed.
Namely others.
Yeah.
And so I find it difficult to balance wanting them to know like they're our most prized possession, but they're not. It's like, you see what I'm saying? And so I wish there was a simple formula to it. So just trust the Lord that, you're doing the best you can and leave the rest up to Him.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, staying on your knees, praying, being humble, and being honest with them too. It's I love. My upbringing was great. We had a great family life. But there was definitely more fear, for me as a kid than what I think I've tried to instill with my kiddos. There's probably a healthy fear and respect there too. But we try and just be very familiar and talk through the issues. And there are a lot of challenging issues for kids growing up in this environment right now. So we've just tried to be very open about that, and we're grateful.
Yeah.
They're great kids.
Thanks for all your time today. It's really fun to spend some time with you and kind of get your insight on some of this stuff. We really appreciate you, being so honest and for being willing to be on the podcast.
Yeah, I love it, Cade. Thanks for all you do for this region. You talk about leadership. You put yourself out there in a big way and are doing great things for this region and culture and in your church and all the things that you're involved in. So it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, thanks, man.